Hey everyone, John Doyle from Optics EQ. Today I'm going to look at Indianapolis, Horseshoe, Indianapolis race 8. It's a stakes race and it's a pretty good race. And it's a pretty good card in the Horseshoe. On Wednesday, July the 5th, I'm doing it right the day of the races. The scratches are in, so this is like the most recent plot. Okay, so the thing we notice about the plot, I keep going over these things just to get into a rhythm. The plot fit is a green, light green. That's good. You can see how it lines up on the diagonal, as we always say. The closer is the diagonal, the more predictive the plot is. Contention is a flame. That means there's a lot of pace in this race, and the speed rating is 39. That's above, a little bit above average. So what I want to do in this race is two things. One, I want to evaluate which of the early pace horses, because you see they're really bunched up, can take pressure and do well. And then I want to evaluate the closers in this race, okay? So I'm going to start with the early pace horses. So I'm going to go to the grid, okay? And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to look at races at today's surface and distance. So I go over to easy filters. This is right there. You don't have to type anything in for yourself. So it's today's surface and distance. So I click that. So that gives me, the horses that have run in the past, how they've done it on this, at this track, but this surface and distance. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is a little different than I normally look. I'm going to look at Optics Notes keywords. And what I want to search for is horses who have taken pressure and how well they've done with that pressure. So I'm going to look at certain keywords. And if you want to look up keywords, you go to Keyword Dictionary, and that shows you all the keywords. So the ones that I know that I associate with pace horses is press. So a horse that gets pressed, press. And I'm going to do these two vertical bars. That means or. So I'm looking for horses that either get pressed, best of speed. So they were in a duel, at least a 3-horse speed duel, how they did. Or I want to look at duel. Okay. So these are the three things I look at. These are horses that are getting pressure early on, right? So I'm going to hit this. And you see the list goes way down. So when you kind of look at this, there's two horses that kind of pop. Well, one definitely, that's the 10 Speedy Delivery. This horse was best of speed, had gait issues, hard lead, pressed, and still went on to win. Another best of speed. So this horse can take heavy pressure and win, it looks like. Let's look at his, just go back to the plot for a second, see where he plots. You can see he's a nice little square up there in quadrant 1. So that's a good sign too, is the horse can take pressure. He's a square in quadrant 1. He's going to be forwardly placed. The only obvious problem could be post position, especially with a lot of speed drawn in, but that might be okay. You can see where the speed goes. So the 10 looks like a horse that can handle pressure. So from the early pace horses was one we might want to consider. The 8 has run real slow at this, and you can see his plot. He's kind of plotting as a circle in quadrant 4. So he's really not a closer, really, even though we kind of designated closer. We'll get back to him when we look at the closers, but the 8, not hot on there. The 6 is okay, just looks a little slower than the numbers that the 10, the 3, and the 11. The 3 and the 11 also have a race where they've taken pressure and done well and run big numbers. So those are the horses you want to look at, especially the 11. He's got he's a good price. And he plots fairly well too. I think he's a square on standard. Yeah, so he's in here. So 3 and 11 are the horses you want to look at, but I would say the 10 has an advantage. The 11 is probably the best value of those early pace horses. So consider those horses maybe underneath or on top or whatever if you're playing an exotic this race, which could be a good race for playing exotics. So let's evaluate the closers now. And that's the 2, 4, 8, and 9. I'm going to go to the 8 because I mentioned the 8 before because he kind of was in this category. And if we just look at the 8 and let's look at when this horse wins, you can see he's not really a deep closer, and he plots as a deep closer, and he's got a circle there in quadrant 4. So I don't like this horse. So from the closer's perspective, we're going to get rid of the 8. And I'm going to come back to the 12 because the 12 kind of sits alone as a presser, and he's got a nice square. I'm going to come back to him because that's another horse we want to consider. But let me just finish evaluating the closers. So that's the 8. The 9 is coming off a huge layoff, and he's never done something like this before, so he's been laid up for a reason. Talamo does take the mount, so interesting. He's in for this. He's probably got some other rides. It's changed barns. I'm just going to take my shot against that horse, saying that he's not primed for a big effort because this is not an easy race. And then the other horse, let's say the 2, 4. So let's look at the 2. Okay, so the 2 had an excuse last time off a big layoff. This horse, again, he's not so much a deep closer, more of a stalker. So he could be closer up. He's got some finishability, as you can see on the plot, a little bit, not so much on standard. You know, he could improve. Obviously, he's got some class. So that's one to consider. Let's look at his record at 6 furlongs. Yeah, he's got a pretty good record at 6 furlongs. The only race that he's run bad was the race he had an excuse in. So here's a horse that definitely got hit the exacta. What's his price in the morning line? 12-1. Okay, that's a horse you want to consider, especially off the EX in this race. So 2, the other horse that we wanted to evaluate was the 4. A little bit more of a deep closer. Came off the pace last time. Seems to be in okay form. This is a horse that never really gotten a fast pace. Expect a little bit faster pace. You can see the race shapes. The one time this horse got a little bit of a fast shape race. This is the race shapes. This is for the half. So this horse got a very fast, was able to close in. So another horse to consider, especially underneath at a big price. This horse is 20-1. So the 4 and the 2 look like closers that are acceptable. We said the 10 looks like the best of the speed. And the 11 looks like it's got some value. The one horse I do want to evaluate because he's got a good plot is the number 12. He kind of fits outside both those. He's more of a stalker type. So let's look at him. This horse is 3rd off a layoff. You know, obviously a horse you want to consider in here. Ran 4th in this race last year. Okay, you know, maybe a horse to consider exotics, but I would say, again, evaluating this race, early pace looks tough. 10 looks the best. The 11 looks like the best value, the early pace runners. And then the 2 and the 4, as the horses from off the pace, look like good long shots in race 8 at Indianapolis today. Thanks for listening.